Hello everyone, welcome to your lecture on sexual division of labor and the public-private dichotomy. This lecture is a part of your paper on gender, media and society. This lecture will help you understand the nature of sexual division of labor in patriarchal societies and its consequences for men and women. It will also help to understand the meaning of public and private dichotomy in patriarchal societies. Women are accorded secondary status vis-a-vis men almost in all cultures across the world. Many researchers contend that sexual dissection of workforce and the confinement of the females in the private sphere, thereby limiting their access to the resources and opportunities of the public sphere, is the main reason behind such marginal status, as said by Rosaldo, 1947, Spain. This brings up two issues that are intensely debated in gender studies. Number one, the sexual dissection of labor, and number two, the public-private dichotomy. The concept of sexual division of labor sheds light on how workforce came to be segregated on the basis of sex, that is, why men and women perform distinctly different kinds of work. The concept of public-private dichotomy delves into the processes operational behind association of women with the private place and that of men with the public places. Sexual division of labor. The materialization of sexual division of labor concept is a crucial apprehension in feminist discussions. In the initial days of feminist movements, the primary focus was on addressing the reasons behind existing social inequalities at the household and family as well as the community and societal levels. The onset of industrialization and modernization processes ushered in significant modifications in the societal and monetary organization of everyday life, which sequentially swayed the parts males and females played in every society. During this period of the question of sexual division of labor received much attention from the feminist writers, who now started focusing upon how the conversation from home to industrial unit production had unfavorably affected the labor division by sex and led to universal subordination of women. There are two broad perspectives which try to address the reasons behind sexual division of labor: biological essentialism and historic materialism based on economic logic. Biological roots behind the sexual partition of labor. According to traditional anthropologists, the sexual division of labor in patriarchal societies is premised on male and female biology. Women remain at home, provide childbirth and also bear the primary responsibility of bringing them up. By virtue of their reproductive role, child rearing comes to be seen as her biological part. By addition, the remaining of the household work associated with child rearing becomes the obvious responsibility of the women. This includes cooking, washing, cleaning, caregiving, etc. Men, on the other hand, are viewed as physiologically stronger than women, capable of engaging in arduous and risk-prone, vigorous work. Thus, the labor completed by women typically is not observed as work, as reproduction is normal to her, while the work completed by men economically productive and hence counted as labor. Such overemphasis on biological differences between man and woman undermine the fact that what nature decrees is not gender role differentiation but reproductive specialization. Rose maintains that women are often regarded as natural creatures and are restricted within the private space by dint of their natural maternal responsibilities. This partition of labor grounded on sex encourages the authority of males over females and of their mistreatment. Women become reliant on men due to such partition of labor, tracing the material basis of sexual division of labor. Tracing the material basis of sexual division of labor. Several scholars have attempted to explain the reasons behind sexual partition of labor upon the basis of economic logic. Engels, in his report, The Origin of the Family, Private Property and the State, was perhaps the first scholar to have explained women's position in the society based on a materialistic theory. In an evolutionary framework, he presented the trajectory of the emergence of private property, which thereby weakened the democratic ethnic order, shaped families as monetary entities, disparities of property, proprietorship, and lastly, unequal class societies. Also entrenched in his explanation is the historical subtleties which led women into transforming from unrestricted and equivalent fruitful associates of society into secondary and helpless wives and wards. Engels continued that in a classless society, the non-attendance of private possessions made both men and women's labor equally important and useful. Elise Boulding, in her seminal work, gives an account of human society since the age of Cro-Magnons and Neanderthals, that is 12,000 BC onwards. In the hunter-gatherer society, where there was neither economic surplus nor any social stratification, the hunting-gathering societies of the prehistoric cultures valued both productive and reproductive roles of women. The sexual division of labor did not surface, and men and women contributed equally to the economy and the society. These were therefore the most egalitarian of all societies in human history. Chakraborty has pointed out that one of the distinguishing features of such social formations was the value attached to women's reproductive role, for which they were revered as Mother Goddess. With the earliest development of agriculture and the subsequent settlements around which it was pursued, more complex social and family structures evolved. private property was primarily owned by man and gradually manufacture for exchange, concealed manufacture for use by the household. Women's work got relegated to private maintenance for family use and became a mere appendage to men's work of producing exchangeable surplus. Private property created its possessor, the leader of the family, that is, recognized men's control over women within the household as well as outside it. Women's role came to be hearth activities including cooking, feeding and care of infants, courtyard activities including production of food, crafts, etc., field activities including gathering and collecting of fruit and nuts, clearing, planting, cultivating and harvesting food, animal rearing, collecting material for building, fuel for hearth and etc. Women combined these with their role of nurturing children. Gradually, special agriculture became more developed. Productivities increased which could sustain larger population densities. Consequently, trade developed and people with higher status withdrew from maintenance of basic activities and wielded superior right to access basic resources through administrative roles. Since women did participate in this whole process of distribution of roles, their right to access of resources narrowed down, thereby reducing their status and opportunities. Over and above this, their new status implied their withdrawal from productive roles. In brief, women failed to specialize when agricultural villages began to be more and more specialized. Consequently, all subsidiary activities were left to women. Thus, women's denigrating status arose when clan structure of society was overtaken by the public sphere. Women, being less skilled and specialized, lost out with the growing preeminence of public sphere, which demanded greater political bonding. The process of sex segregation of labor further got amplified with the emergence of industrial capitalism. Most researches on women's contemporary universal subordination stands on the supposition of an essential historical conversion in females' labor force involvement and position in the 18th and 19th century coterminous with the increase of industrialized capitalism. Marxists have characteristically contended that the expansion of capitalism had directed to a deteriorating female's place with the parting of the household from waged work. The family economy was overtaken by the family household system, a combination of a domestic arrangement constructed on the requirement of associates, on the salaried work of fathers or husbands, and the unsalaried work of the mother or the wife in household tasks, and the ideology of the family. The private sphere beyond the public realm of community and individuals. Before, men and women worked in family industries. In general, men performed the more skilled works while women did most of the processing of raw resources or finishing end produces. After industrialization, the family industry system started to break down due to the demand for superior productivity. The capitalists structured manufacture on a greater measure and production became disconnected from the home. Consequently, women got excluded from the production process and became increasingly dependent on men. These developments in the mid-19th century forced women into the basis for a sexually segregated labor market, which in turn formed the basis of socially constructed gender differences. Production for exchange refers to the production of goods used to gain control over the services of others. On the other hand, production of use refers to producing goods for meeting consumption needs. The term family wage economy refers to a unit made up of family members who worked for wages in the family interest. It succeeded the old family economy of the household mode of production, yet the hold of the family economy on behavior, mentalities and social structures continued as long as all family members had some economic functions. However, some women did seek work driven by necessity in the capitalist-owned factories as wage laborers. Even then, women were placed at the receiving end. Firstly, they continued to receive lower wages as in agriculture. Secondly, women were less skilled than men and therefore mostly engaged in low paid and less desirable jobs. Thirdly, they appeared to be less organized than men. The categorized separation of work between males and females and its subtleties forms an essential chunk of the leading manufacture relation in society all through history. Public-private contradiction. The sexual partition of labor is manifested in the form of a spatial organization of the society in terms of the public and private realm. The public realm is shared in common with the others and is characterized by such the activities as participation, prolific or salaried work, implementing independent civil and political rights beneath the whole government jurisdiction and the state. On the contrary, the private domain is the personal space of the home, family and intimate relationships, comparatively unrestricted from the state jurisdiction. As ordained by the sexual division of labor, the public sphere has come to be appropriated by men while the private sphere is the territory of the women. According to Davidoff, in the interior of modern society, the private and the public stay a perception with powerful material and experiential consequences. As a plain share of the manner, our entire societal and psychic domains are ordered. As per the liberal political perspectives, the beginning of the public-private dichotomy can be traced back to the writings of the social contract theorists which explored the legitimacy of government and the state. According to this school of thought, the social contract ushered in a new social order comprising of two domains. Firstly, political and public, and secondly, private and detached from politics. Pateman views that in traditional social contract theory, these domains were gendered. The public realm necessarily emerged as a masculine one because only men were reckoned as capable of being informed citizens. On the other hand, women were essentially viewed in terms of their sexual identities such that they were considered as unfit for active participation in political life. Therefore, the private sphere was deemed as appropriate for women. Thus, according to the classical social contract theorists, the ideological functions of public-private in conjunction with gender serve to develop and maintain hierarchical social relations between men and women. Feminist scholars reflect upon historical studies of the beginning of public-private contradiction. Davidoff, for example, inspected the gendered disposition of numerous notions connected to the private and the public in the context of 19th century England. Ortner explored this debate from the eco-feminist standpoint and tried to explain women's alliance with private domain regarding of the direction of femininity is created as being alongside nature, which is undervalued, whereas manliness is created as closer to values, which is extremely valuable. Some feminist writers examine women's subordinate position in the public domain from a Marxist perspective. Others explicate women's confinement to the private sphere in the light of the theories of patriarchy. Wolby distinguished between two forms of patriarchy, private and public. While the former is based within the household and taking recourse to a more exclusionary strategy leads to expropriation of women, the latter is functional in the outside domain where state and public employment come into play and entail public appropriation of women through a rather segregationist strategy. Spain states that patriarchy is played out in the private while capitalism in the public space. It can therefore be argued that the private form of patriarchal domination is reinforced by practices more of socio-cultural nature, while the public form of patriarchy is sustained by practices that perpetuate economic inequity based on gender. The notions of the public-private does not only pertain to physical spatial segregation between men and women, but also expounds the construction of their lived experiences as gendered existences. For instance, concepts of public and private are often invoked in the context of violence committed against women. Plenty of evidences exist in our everyday lives where women whose modesty has been outraged or those who are sexually violated have been readily stigmatized and their character brutally assassinated. Issues such as whether she was at the right place and at the right time, whether she was wearing uninviting clothes, whether she was accompanied by male or female companions, etc., assume the focal point rather than penalizing the perpetrator. In Lessons of Labor Marketplace, academics have revealed how notions about the public and the private, that is, ideas of legitimate place and role of men and women, actually structure their experiences and opportunities in relation to nature of work done, occupational segregation, wages and rewards. These empirical studies observe that the public and the private are not binary opposite realms, but are characterized by equally codependent set of social relationships. Readings on gender, domestic work and remunerated work have revealed that men's strategic place in remunerated work needs to be looked at in the context of the bulk of housework and childcare done by women. Despite the several merits of the public-private framework in explaining the subordinate status of women in the society, be it in terms of spatial segregation or figurative marginalization, the building of the private and the public has been critiqued on a number of counts. Firstly, these two spheres are mutually interdependent, fluid and amenable to changes based on everyday societal relations and via long period procedures of political scuffle. Secondly, this binary model is premised on the fact that politics is a formal characteristic of the public spaces. The critics argue that this is a rather narrow view in that it underscores the fact that even the relations within the private realm pertaining to wedding, sexuality, maternity, domestic course, etc. are underlain by the politics of influence. Summing up this lecture, we learned that the sexual division of labor and the public-private opposition therefore play an important role in repeating gender disparities. Feminist authors contend that there is a necessity for reshaping of the notion. Lister classifies three key basics to the rebuilding of the public-private opposition and the connection between them. Firstly, it is imperative to dismantle the gendered makings and characteristics associated with the private and the public, such that these become dissociated from the notions of masculinity and femininity and the hierarchical power relations embedded therein. Secondly, it must be remembered that the public-private divide tend to get blurred, especially in the context of developing countries like India, through multiple and complex interpenetrations of the two spheres. It is also important to remember that it plays an important role in structuring gender inequalities. Thirdly, it must be recognized that the altering restrictions of the private and public spaces, including the action of categorizing actions as either private or public, is an implementation of power. Hope you enjoyed the lecture. For more details, please read the e-text of this lecture properly and attempt the questions in the end. Thank you.